social media companies, basically stealing your data and selling it. But also with Apple and Google, the control that they're exerting on their ecosystems, where you can't even sell something through the iOS App Store without them taking their cut. You can't publish software on their platform if they don't agree with it. There's just huge censorship.
Welcome to the Rose Show podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with Ken Carpenter. He is co-founder and chief technology officer of Foundation Devices. They are building Bitcoin-centric tools that empower people to reclaim their sovereignty. So how are you doing today, Ken?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Rosanna?
Great, thank you. I know you're in that sunny San Diego area, so I'm sure you're doing very well down there.
Right outside the window here.
It's lovely.
Yeah, it's really nice here today. Yeah.
Awesome. So, you're co-founder of Foundation Devices. I believe it started in 2020. So tell us about Foundation Devices and your company's mission.
Yeah, so the mission of the company, maybe I can just go back and tell you how we started. We were previously working at a company together. Yeah, the four of us that co-founded Foundation were working at a company called Nebulous. And that company had a subsidiary called Obelisk. And we did some work there. Maybe we can get into my background a little bit later, but we were working on shitcoin ASIC miners. And toward the end of that, we decided, maybe we should do some other hardware, not just these ASIC miners. And the idea for doing a Bitcoin hardware wallet came up. And so we started working on that. And I guess after several months of that, the CEO of that company decided, don't really want to do this anymore. Let's just drop that project. But the four of us who were working on it were pretty jazzed to continue doing it. And we thought that was a big mistake to drop the project. So we started talking about it and we thought, well, why don't we just, spin out? We already didn't like some stuff that was happening at the company. So why don't we just spin out and start our own company and build the wallet? And so that's what we did. We had some ideas for what would be a better Bitcoin wallet than what we saw out there. And, in the middle of, or the beginning of the pandemic, we just sort of quit our jobs and went and did this.
That's awesome.
And so the motivation, is to give people sovereignty. That's the biggest reason for this wallet. And I think one of the biggest reasons to use Bitcoin, a lot of people get into Bitcoin with the idea of making money, which is sort of how I first approached it before I learned, what Bitcoin was sort of really about. And a lot of them are surprised when you tell them about the sovereignty angle. They don't really realize all the other values that Bitcoin can bring to the table. They just look at it as a get rich quick scheme, and there's so much more to it than that.
Absolutely. We talk about Bitcoin as a global reserve asset with an inelastic supply. So you don't have what is occurring with fiat debasement right now. So yes, as an asset. Now, I want to begin with, before we get into your background and how you came about to this amazing project, I want to continue talking about Foundation Devices itself. Now, it's a hardware wallet as well as a mobile app. And I know that there are others out there, but in my opinion, I think you have a fantastic product. Tell us what you're offering and how it's different and how you improved upon what you saw in the current marketplace.
Sure. Yeah, so we have two products. Passport is the wallet, and Envoy is the mobile app that goes. So Passport is a hardware wallet, and hardware wallet's actually an unfortunate name for these things because it makes people think that the Bitcoin's in there.
Yes.
But Bitcoin's not in there.
That's an important concept.
The device, and this is the device here.
Yes.
And so this device is a signer. It's a cryptographic signing device, and it stores private keys in a chip called a secure element. And so we saw that there were some, to us, there's a few important things about what a hardware wallet should do. You know, it should have a secure element to keep secrets safe, even in the case of somebody gaining physical access to your device. It should have a good screen on it, because you need one of the most important things a hardware wallet does is show you the address you're sending to and the amount that you're sending and any change amount that's on there. And so if you have a hardware wallet, for example, like the upcoming BitKey that doesn't have a screen, we think like that doesn't really even qualify as a hardware wallet. And they actually don't use that word. So I think they believe that too. It has its uses, but it's not the same use case as what we're offering. And we want it to be user friendly as well, right? We want this to be a device that, you know, you can pick up, you can use, you can understand how to use it really easily. And we saw that in the market for us, there was no device that had like a nice big screen, was easy to use, had a secure element, fully open source hardware, fully open source software. And we saw opportunity to make this, you know, easy for the next, you know, billion people to onboard to Bitcoin.
Very nice.
And so then with Envoy, we first released Passport on its own, no app required. And then we thought, okay, we can make this even easier for people by providing a companion app. So up until that point, Passport had been compatible with, you know, the Blue Wallets and Sparrows, Nunchuck Wallet, and, you know, maybe half a dozen or so other wallets that we supported directly. And we decided, you know, those are great, and people who are using them can continue to do so, but we wanted to make an experience for Passport that was like built for it from the ground up. Like these two things are designed to work together. So when you get your Passport and unbox it, now if you use Envoy, you have an onboarding process where these two devices work together to help you get it set up, help you understand, you know, what you're doing and the security implications of your keys, help you create your first offline backup if you so choose, you know, get your seed words. If you want to put them on a metal seed plate, you can do that. And it just walks you through the whole process, which, you know, for a lot of people, the first time setting up a Bitcoin wallet can be a pretty, you know, confusing and hard experience for them. It's we wanted to do what we can to make that as easy as possible.
Absolutely. When we met at the Bitcoin convention in Miami Beach, I was amazed at how simple it was. And I love that screen. I think that's reassuring for people to see it and see where it's going and to see that process rather than just a hard drive or hardware. I know that's a strange word to use, but yeah, just a piece of equipment versus it looks like a phone, right? I mean, it looks like the old like Nokia phone, and I like it. I think it's really cool. You have a great product that you designed with I know it's 4 of you that designed that. So Ken, tell us about your background, what you've brought. You're a chief technology officer. Are you a programmer? Are you an engineer? What's your background and where did you get started with all this?
Yeah, I'm the CTO, so, you know, I'm kind of a big deal.
Yeah, you're the big deal. You're the big man.
So yeah, I'm an engineer, computer science background. So my degree is in computer science. I kind of been all over the map from the lowest level writing interrupt drivers and, you know, low level embedded systems all the way up to doing, you know, web pages and things like that. But, you know, I started off building automation. And so, you know, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning control systems. I got into factory automation shortly after that. You know, build, you know, equipment in factories is all computerized and all networked together. So I was leading teams doing network development for that. You know, I worked for a company who did audio and video transcoding for TV and advertising networks. So like when you send an ad, if you're an advertiser, you send your ad to the TV and radio network. It went through this company sort of before that was taken over by the internet to be, you know, playing that role. I led a team building a space-based, massively multiplayer strategy game. I worked on server development for Electronic Arts for a couple of years, lobby and matchmaking and score reporting and online leagues type of stuff. Then I got into web-based user interface stuff for Arista Networks. We worked on a bunch of, well, I mainly worked on a bunch of tools to help visualize and configure your, industrial scale networking at large companies. I worked for ServiceNow for a little while. They have a software as a service platform, which provides workflow automation capabilities to big companies. So, when somebody onboards, all the right people get notified and the right things happen at the right times and all the dependencies in there. I also worked on Wall Street, as I mentioned just before we were starting recording here. I was in Manhattan for a couple of years, working for Hudson River Trading, and they're a high-frequency trading company. Interesting side fact, though, two of the founders of HRT are Alex and Suhas, who run Chain Code Labs, which is a Bitcoin-specific sort of incubator, and they've got a bunch of really smart people working there, helping to promote and improve Bitcoin. And that was sort of where I first sort of got interested in crypto again. Back in 2010, I think it was, I saw this segment on the news one night, and it was talking about this thing called Bitcoin, which I'd never heard of. And it was a few minutes long segment, but it was pretty dismissive of it as sort of this, like we all hear about this nerd money. It was like these nerds trying to make money. And so I didn't really think too much about it back then, unfortunately. And then back at Hudson River Trading, they started to trade crypto, including Bitcoin. And that sort of woke me up to it again. And I thought, okay, well, if these guys are interested in trading this, there's got to be something I need to learn more about here. And after a little while, I got involved in the shitcoin side of it. I mentioned, like, a lot of people come to Bitcoin for the investment. That's what I did. But I was looking at it as an investment opportunity, and I didn't understand the sovereignty aspects of it. And I felt pretty late to the party for Bitcoin. I thought, oh, it's already had its huge run up. Like, what's it going to do from here? Like 2x, 3x? I mean, how much higher can it go? And so I started to look into other, shitcoins and see, like, well, what might be, what's after Bitcoin? What's going to be the next big thing that I can get in on earlier? And so I found one called Coin, which was not a currency per se, but it's a token for a decentralized storage network. And so I started getting really interested in that, and I ended up buying some of the mining hardware that they were developing. And little by little, I got more and more into the community, and eventually they offered me a job working at the company that was building them. And I ended up writing all the firmware for the miners that I had previously purchased. So it's just a little bit of an interesting twist for me. And while working on those shitcoins, I was using a piece of code called CG Miner. And CG Miner is the code base that's used in Bitcoin mining for Bitcoin ASIC mining. And so prior to this, I didn't know how Bitcoin mining or crypto mining worked at all. And so I was ramping up pretty quick on this and learning about CG Miner. How does it work? What's a nonce? What are all these different things that you do to actually push an ASIC miner to perform quickly and do the job? And so I had to learn, like, what is mining? Why do we even have mining? And so I had to learn that in the context of Bitcoin. And as I did that, I was reading more and more articles about what makes Bitcoin unique. And so it was kind of at that moment, while shitcoining, basically, that I really understood what Bitcoin was about. And that was kind of around the time, as I mentioned earlier, where we started to think about having a Bitcoin hardware wallet. And so that was sort of like the fork in the road for me. It's like, continue shitcoining, go towards Bitcoin. And so we chose to move towards Bitcoin.
Very nice. Everything came together for you. So when did you start investing, and when did you begin really going into Bitcoin? When did you become a Bitcoiner, would you say? What year about?
Really, about 2018 is probably when I bought my first Bitcoin.
Very nice.
So it's only been, 5 years.
That's awesome. We always
Yeah,
say, I wish I had started earlier. And, it's
yeah,
never too late, because now, hey, we're in 2023. 2018 is a pretty nice time to start, for a lot of people who are just opening their eyes to Bitcoin. That's a great window to have entered Bitcoin. So congrats to you, Ken. What is Bitcoin to you? It's freedom, truth, hope, the future, an asset, digital gold. What does it represent to you?
freedom, I think, is probably the biggest thing. And I think there's sort of three aspects to it. The most important, I think, is sovereignty that we touched on a bit already. Bitcoin puts you in control of your money, assuming you don't leave it on an exchange, which I think we might talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, this wasn't something I really got in the early days on my Bitcoin journey. Was the sovereignty aspect? People always say, "Not your keys, not your coins,"
Mm-hmm.
but it's also it's your coins and nobody else's. Um, so they belong to you, and nobody, including the government, can touch them without the keys. We saw, like, in the case of the Canadian truckers, a year and a half or so ago, the Canadian government froze people's bank accounts for protesting. And, if those people had had all their money in Bitcoin, they would have been just fine. There would have been nothing the government could have done. If those people had had their money on exchanges, the government could have asked the exchanges to freeze their accounts. So again, the whole "not your keys, not your coins" thing really comes down to sovereignty. Are you in control of your money? And I think for me, that's the biggest thing about Bitcoin, if you do it right, is that you're in control of your money. So things like BlackRock ETFs, while I think it's great that there's going to be a bunch of money coming into Bitcoin, and probably a lot of price appreciation from that, my hope is that a large number of those people over time start to realize, I better get my money out of this thing that doesn't give me the main reason for Bitcoin's existence and move it into real Bitcoin. So that's my hope there. And the other big thing is decentralization. There's no single entity in control of Bitcoin. You can debate whether the core team has too much control over the source code, or if there's centralization in mining, but I think those are all solvable issues. And Bitcoin is by and large decentralized and not subject to control by governments or big companies. And I might get into a bit of a rant here, but the other big one is that Bitcoin, is this global immutable ledger, right? I mean, that's what it is. That's its main purpose. And a lot of opponents of Bitcoin will often trot out the Bitcoin uses too much energy argument. But everything that's worthwhile uses energy. I mean, the existing financial system, banks, mutual funds, options trading, stock exchanges, governments, they all use a lot of energy. That there's the buildings that you build and operate, the people, the vehicles that expend energy to get to and from those buildings, the equipment they operate in their data centers, the computers, heating, lighting, air conditioning, sort of goes on and on. And that's repeated like in every city and every country in the world. So does that use energy? Yes. Does that provide something of value? Yes. Does Bitcoin use energy? 100% uses energy. Does it provide something of value? Yeah. A global immutable ledger, like you can build a lot of things on the back of that, and people are building a lot of things on the back of that. And things like Lightning help build additional things on top of it. And as soon as you start to peg things to the Bitcoin blockchain and the processing on there, I think there's a lot of value that is nascent still, and it's going to be built up over the next 5 to 10 years.
Agree. Well said. I love it. It's never a rant. I love all your points. And I recently I was very honored and fortunate to have met with Michael Saylor. And I want to add to what you said. Everything you said, exactly right on. I love it. I agree. He also said, Bitcoin is economic energy. And I just love talking about it like that. A lot of this is for our viewers. I mean, we have people who are just, starting out with Bitcoin, beginners to advanced Bitcoiners who know far more than I do. But we're all here to learn together. It's economic energy, so much more than just money. And there's another important point. It's immutable and incorruptible, and it's against censorship, and it provides authenticity. So if you want to send a message into the future, it's just amazing how Bitcoin is the way. And he made a point that there hasn't been anything as great as that humans have created since maybe the pyramids. Just some massive, powerful force, and just an amazing to think of it in that way. And it's a separation of money and state, but also property from earth. And just fascinating stuff. It's the whole philosophy of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is hope, and Bitcoin is the future. But you said a very important word that I'd like to delve into more, and that's self-sovereignty and the importance of that. And I love your website. I urge everyone to check out foundationdevices.com, because it gets very philosophical, and you talk about Isaac Asimov, and I love that. My husband reads those, but the whole trilogy, I think, many times and more, Pebble in the Sky and all those books. But you talk about the tech industry has evolved into a centralized, invasive, pro-censorship industry. And people need to be aware of that. And there's nothing free in this world. Facebook and Twitter and all these social media platforms, you can use them, unless you want the blue check mark, they're all basically free, but it's not really free. And, we relinquished our digital freedom in exchange for convenience. And, there's a line between the physical and digital world is blurred because we live online. We're always online. And so it's ever more important to have this sovereignty in cyberspace. So please talk to us about this self-sovereignty and the importance of it.
Yeah, so we're really disenchanted with the state of a lot of high-tech companies, as you sort of hinted at. In addition to the social media companies, basically stealing your data and selling it, but also with Apple and Google, the control that they're exerting on their ecosystems, where you can't even sell something through the iOS App Store without them taking their cut. You can't publish software on their platform if they don't agree with it. There's just huge censorship there. There's ongoing lawsuits with respect to that. We hope one day to be able to be in a place where we can make a device that is free and self-sovereign in that respect, where I paid for this device, but I'm not allowed to say what goes onto it right now, which we think is completely wrong. So we want to build a device that puts you in control of your hardware. You're in control of your hardware. You decide what software is on it. You decide what data is stored on it. You're in control. Self-sovereignty means you're in control. And so that starts off with, we sort of have these three pillars of data, identity, and money. And so money, you're in control of your money with this. In the future, we want to build products that allow you to be in control of your data. Right now, if you store data on Google Cloud or, Amazon AWS, they control that data. They can cut you off from that data at any time. And this has happened. We want to put you in control of your data, put you in control of your money, and your identity is another big one. We haven't personally, as a company, explored exactly what that's going to mean to us, but having the ability to digitally sign something is a beginning. And you have a device that can sign things on your behalf and prove who you are. And so we're exploring different things that we can do in that respect as well. But self-sovereignty comes down to being in control, not allowing a third party to intervene and block you out from your data, your money, and your identity. That would be the the first thing I would say. I don't know if you have any response to that. I can continue,
Well, I think that it's important for people to realize that they don't own this data, and it can be changed. It's not immutable. It's they could easily and this is an example that was told to me. They could change a word that you say. Let's say this podcast. They could change something that's in this podcast and then say that item is not allowed or it's censored, and then they could actually just censor everything. And so you don't have that authenticity. So censorship's a big one. And I think that's an important concept that people need to understand. But the money issue, which is what we're going to get into with the Bitcoin.
Not your keys, not your coins.
Not your coins, okay? Not your keys, not your coins. So you're not actually, your money, like you said, but Canadian bank, they can close it down. They can stop your withdrawals. So it's like technically, even though your money is at the bank, it's not really yours, and it's not always accessible. So by storing it off the exchange, it's actually yours. Could you tell us about that concept and that side of it with owning your keys?
Yeah, so these days, the hardware wallet, in our case, is storing a copy of your private key. And it stores it in a secure element to protect it from hacking. That key, without that key, you cannot access your funds. And so this does bring some personal responsibility to the table. Self-sovereignty is not a free concept. It's very hard to say, I'm self-sovereign, but then, complain to somebody when you lost the key. One of the reasons you mentioned, people are trading convenience for privacy in a lot of cases with the social networks. In the traditional financial system, we're trading responsibility for control. So if someone doesn't want to be responsible for their own money, they cede that control to a third party, and now that third party is basically in control of them, and or their government is in control of them. We think that the mere act of having to control, 12 or 24 word seed, that act alone gives you control of your money. And, maybe that's still too much for some people. And that's fine. But there is a huge segment of the population who wants to be in control of their money, for whom storing a seed backup somewhere is not an onerous thing. And we try and make that really easy for you with Passport. We help you make encrypted offline MicroSD backups of your seed. And so then, you're able to sort of spread these backups around to various places. So we're trying to help you be self-sovereign by giving you the tools to make it easy for you. Try and overcome any objection that a person might have who's nervous about doing this, and show them, here's why you don't need to be nervous. Here are the tools that you can have and use to give yourself self-sovereignty, if that's not too repetitive.
That's great.
And so that's kind of the ongoing mission, is to find ways to make it easier for you to be self-sovereign, and to make it so that, it should not be a life-changing event if I lose this device. If I'm out on my boat, you hear about people who are out on their boat and their hard drive fell overboard or something, or their yacht sunk. However you lose this device, it should not be a life-changing event. And so we're working on tools and features that will, make it so that you can have safe backups and be able to recover from losing a device. Whether you go out and buy another Passport or not, we're not locking you into our platform in any way. You don't have to. If you lose this, you don't have to go buy another Passport. It would be great if you did, but we're not going to lock you in any kind of sort of vendor lock-in way with a proprietary backup format or anything like that. You can recover your backup from any offline device, preferably offline, so that the key is never exposed online. Yeah.
I love that your philosophy comes through with the company. You know, it's about freedom, and even with that occurring, people are free, that they don't have to be locked into foundation devices. You know, eliminating intermediaries and being decentralized is key. So then you take the responsibility of maintaining these keys. And, you know, and you mentioned a great point earlier. The Bitcoin is not stored in that little hardware wallet. It is not
Right.
in that wallet. It's actually in
Right.
cyberspace. So tell
Yeah.
us about, what is the importance of not storing your Bitcoin on the exchanges?
Yes, the exchanges. So I guess there's a few things. Number one is this control. So over the years, people who have been around longer will have seen many exchanges fail or collapse in various ways. So there was like the MT Gox collapse back in 2014, which I think they originally lost like 850,000 Bitcoin, and then like 200,000 were found later. So 650,000 Bitcoin is like $20 billion. That's a lot of money that people lost. In Canada, there was Quadriga CX exchange where the founder kept the keys on his personal laptop on an encrypted drive, and he died. And no one had the password to log into his laptop. So nobody could unlock the funds that the customers had deposited to his exchange. So that's a case of, you know, the money's still there, the money's still on the blockchain, but nobody can access it because they don't have the keys. If by some miracle in the future they figure out what his password was and they decrypt that laptop, then they can access the coins again. So that's the great thing about like this hardware. This hardware doesn't hold the Bitcoin. So if I crush it, it's okay. This is like a convenience device for you to access it and sign things. This is a signing device. So when your private key is in here, you can control your Bitcoin. If your private key is not in here, you can't control your Bitcoin. So that's why you need to back it up somewhere so that you can restore it into here at some point in the future. If you lost this, you can get a new one, restore your key, you can sign again. So and then more recently, you know, we saw with FTX and Samuel Bankman-Fried, right? They basically took your money and gambled it on risky investments and lost big time. And that's because you put those people who lost money, you know, I'm sorry if anyone listening is one of them, it sucks. But like the lesson is, you know, you put your money in someone else's control rather than your own. And at that point, they can do whatever they want with it. You have no visibility into it and no control over whether they do something, you know, risky or unsafe with it. So the good news, though, is that there's a lot of alternatives coming up now that don't require trusting the third party in the same way. There's things like Peach Bitcoin, HODL HODL, BISC, RoboSats, and a bunch of other, I think DYDX, a bunch of like decentralized exchanges where you can either trade, you know, between coins or even trade between fiat and Bitcoin, for example. So I'm happy to see those up and coming, and I think, you know, if you do need to go back and forth between fiat and Bitcoin, or if you really want to trade to some other coin, like using one of those instead of Binance or, you know, Gemini or any of those is a much safer bet. Or if you are going to use Binance and Gemini, like get in, do the trades you need to do, and then get out. Don't leave it sitting there. A couple other problems with exchanges is, you know, you're subject to KYC, or know your customer laws. Those laws require exchanges to collect personal information about you, and it's reportable to the government. So apart from, you know, any other tax implications that you might not be comfortable with, having to put your money on exchange and have the government see all the transactions you made, this is like a honeypot of information for hackers. All this personal information is sitting in a database on these exchanges, you know, on their servers. And, you know, it's not just exchanges too, but like hardware wallet companies and other companies in the crypto space often collect this personally identifying information, or PII, they call it. But they have an abysmal track record of keeping your information safe, not just in the crypto space, but the tech space at large has just been, almost every day you hear about some leak or hack and customer records being exposed. Even in our space, Ledger in 2020 leaked 270,000 customer records. A lot of people are really unhappy about that and won't use Ledger again because of that. And so trusting your information, or trusting your Bitcoin on an exchange, is one thing, but you also are trusting your personal information not to be hacked or exposed. And then we talked about this already, but like, the government can, with respect to self-sovereignty, the government can tell the exchange to freeze your accounts. So sort of three major things here, like, they're not trustable. They'll do whatever they want with your money, potentially losing it. They could freeze your money, and you're giving up your KYC information to them, which they're at some point probably going to leak to some, hacker.
Exactly. Well said. That's very important for people to understand that, it's still, when you're on the exchange, there's so much information out there that they know about you, and it's not really yours. And it's still, you're still using like an intermediary, it's not completely free. So it's important to retain that sovereignty by placing your Bitcoin on a hardware wallet. The Passport is the device, and then there's the Envoy. Could you tell us how that works, how it's user-friendly, how those two work together? So now, let's say you buy on the exchange. Let's say you go to Coinbase, for example. That's a pretty common one. And you purchase on there. You have to wait, I think, usually a couple days before you transfer. Then you send it over to the Envoy. And then how does that whole process work with the hardware wallet and the mobile app?
Yes. So I mentioned originally that we first shipped Passport without an app, and we were relying on third-party wallets to be the software side of things for people. But we wanted to have an integrated experience. So Envoy works with Passport mostly by sharing QR codes. So we worked with a group called Blockchain Commons, and they developed this standard called UR, or Uniform Resources, along with an animated QR code format. So, QR codes can only store, a small amount of information. Sometimes we need to transmit more information. And although our screen is pretty big compared to other hardware wallets, it's still not the same size as like a phone. So that even further restricts how much data you can fit into a single QR code. So this animated QR code basically lets you sort of chunk the message up and send part 1, part 2, part 3, and it just cycles through these QR codes to send larger amounts of data. And so, what you do with Envoy and Passport is, if you got your two devices here, you scan, there's a phone in Passport, and you can scan a QR code on your phone. And then, if you're signing a transaction, you sign it on here, and then you reverse the devices and you scan Passport screen with your phone. And so that's the two-way air-gapped communication that we provide. And so I mentioned that we have this onboarding process where the two devices work together, and they sort of go through one screen at a time on each side, and you can then at certain points you can scan information back and forth to share the public key with Envoy, and also to validate addresses. That's an important thing to do that a lot of people don't really do when they're sending Bitcoin, or receiving Bitcoin for that matter, is validate addresses. When you make a new receive address with your Passport, with your Envoy, you can scan it with Passport to be 100% sure that that address is owned by your hardware wallet. Let's say somebody at Apple were to be a rogue employee and build a version of Envoy that had some hack in it, where they send it to their address instead of your wallet address. If you were checking your address each time you make an address and checking it with the Passport, that hack can never hurt you, because you're making sure that people are only sending money to your address, not to some other address. And then, so after the onboarding, the main things people typically do are sending transactions. And so there's a PSBT, or partially signed Bitcoin transaction format. We send those as QR codes back and forth as well. So we maintain what we call the air gap, where there's no wireless communication, no wired communication between your phone and your passport, or your computer and your passport. It's all through very explicit QR code sharing. And that keeps your device safe, and it means that you're exposed to you're not exposed to a complete class of attacks. So there's no remote attack that can attack your passport wallet, right? It has no wired or wireless communication. So the only attacks you could potentially mount against this require you to have it in your hand, right? There's no, with your phone is connected to the internet, your computer is connected to the internet. So maybe there's no vulnerabilities, but maybe there are, and those are exploitable because of the wireless connections that those devices have.
Very cool. I love it.
And the other interesting thing we just brought to Envoy recently is it's now a hot wallet. And so, there's a difference between a hot wallet and a cold wallet. So a hot wallet is kind of like, the money you walk around with in your pocket, maybe a few $100. And that wallet has its own key that is maintained on Envoy. And we have this thing called magic backups, where we use a seed of we use a hash of your seed as sort of like your username, and we store some information on our servers encrypted, and it's identified by the hash of your seed. So we don't know your seed on our server. We don't even know the content of the data that we're storing, but we do store it for you so that at some point in the future you can look it up again if you have the right hash. And then the hot wallet seed, not the passport seed, the hot wallet seed is stored encrypted in iCloud or on Google Cloud, depending on which device you're using. So we take advantage of something called the keychain on iOS, which is like an encrypted local storage where apps can store sensitive information. That is encrypted locally and then stored in the cloud such that Apple or Google can't even read it. And so what's great here, and the reason we call this magic backups, is once it's done, if you lost your phone, as soon as you get your new phone and you log back into your account, we can restore your Envoy to exactly the same state it was in on your previous device, including with your hot wallet seed restored and access to your money restored.
Wow.
So we think that's a pretty great user experience, where literally you open up Envoy and it will figure out if you had a seed, and it will just restore it for you. Like, it's just magic.
It is magic. It's so brilliant. I love that. That's something that's specific to Foundation devices that you all created. I love that.
Yeah. We don't know. I don't know of anyone else doing anything similar, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone else starts to do something similar. I do want to really make it clear, though, that it's not the passport seed, because, with the Ledger issue, with their Ledger Recover, they got a lot of flack for storing the seed in the cloud. And, we don't transmit the seed from here to Envoy. We don't store the passport cold wallet seed in the magic backup. That's completely different thing. So we keep those two worlds isolated. And so it's up to you to decide where you back up the seed for this device. So we do give the ability to put a MicroSD card in here,
yes,
make an encrypted backup, and you can store those wherever you want. But that's on you now. That's not an online backup. That's a physical world backup. Or you view the seed on here and write it down on a paper or seed words. And when you first create the seed, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to write it down and I'm going to stamp it on seed words. And you can do that if you want, but you don't have to, because with the MicroSD backups, if you make a few of those, you're in pretty good shape.
Very cool. So we have the Passport hardware wallet. And I know your products are made in the USA, which is very important. I love that. We support our local country here, USA made. air gap security, and there's no outside contact. That's important. And it's fully open source. Then you have the Envoy mobile app, which is a simple Bitcoin wallet on your phone, which I love that. I think it's a great app. So, and that's what uses it's the Envoy that uses the magic backups. Is that correct? That's what you're saying?
Right. Right.
Very nice.
So if you are a new Envoy user, excuse me, the first thing we do is say, hey, we're going to create a new Envoy key for you now. You'll also be able to like import your own key if you choose. But like right now, the most common thing people are going to do is just create a new random key. It gets backed up to the storage automatically. And like I mentioned, you can restore from it in the future. So like you open Envoy, it creates the key, you're good to go. If you can use, and this is the other interesting thing, is like you can use Envoy today as your wallet without having to have a passport. That was not the case before. Previously, Envoy was the companion app for Passport. And if you didn't have a passport, there wasn't much point in having Envoy. Now you can have Envoy as your hot wallet, which is a great, easy to use wallet. We provide a ton of videos and support material to help people understand, Bitcoin and how to use this wallet. But you can use it standalone now. You don't have to buy Passport. Like, let's say you only have like a few $100 worth of Bitcoin. You're just getting started. You can start with Envoy, and then when you start to feel uncomfortable with the amount of Bitcoin you have in your hot wallet, then you could consider, adding a Passport into the mix, and then the two are going to work seamlessly together. We're working on some features later this year where you'll be able to. You can do it today, but it's more difficult. But you'll be able to transfer funds. So just like you go into your bank, you're like, oh, transfer from my cold wallet to my hot wallet. Like we're going to make it like one click type of a thing where we validate everything for you and have Passport validate that transaction when you sign it. And it's going to be very easy to treat it like almost like a bank account where you move funds between different accounts on the Envoy app.
Love that. Pure decentralized peer-to-peer transactions can exist. I love that. You said that you had the Passport. You could have used the Passport alone. Then you have the Envoy, and now you can use them together. And then you can also use the Envoy by itself as well. I love that you have so many options, and it's so flexible, and it's really great. I think you have excellent products there. Now I want to ask you about Tor connection and how you can connect it to a node. Could you tell us about how that works with the Passport and Envoy?
Yeah, so Passport isn't connected to anything. So it's only an Envoy thing, but in the advanced settings in an Envoy, you can paste a link to your Tor server or to another server if you want. So right now, by default, just step back a moment. In order to talk to the Bitcoin network, you have to talk to some node to broadcast your transactions, and so by default, right now, we have our own node. And Envoy will talk to that node to transmit to the network. Some people like to run their own nodes. That is one more step along the self-sovereignty road, is running your own node. And those people are supported by Envoy because we let you put your Tor or local IP, I think, in there as well, if it's on the same network as your phone. You can put whatever it is, you can put your IP address or your Tor address in there and connect to your own node. And that will let you, or like you can also choose someone else's node if you don't want to use our node, for whatever reason. But what that lets you do is be in control of which node is transmitting to the Bitcoin network. And for a lot of people, that's like one step they don't care about. It's not that important to them because the only thing you could really do if you're transmitting to a node who has bad intentions is they could like not transmit your transaction. Like they can't change it because of the cryptography of how transactions are signed. They can't change it, but they could delay it. So if you want to make sure that your node transmits it for sure, you can run your own node. You know what software is running on it, and you'd be sure that it's transmitted. But we also, I mean, there's a bunch of information on there too. I guess a node could also not report transactions back to you if it wanted. Like a transaction that sent money to you, it maybe could block it, and then you wouldn't see that transaction. But with your own node, that's not going to happen.
Very cool.
And then the Tor aspect of it, is, to make sure that you have anonymity, basically, right? Like no one knows where each end of the connection really lives in the world. Tor, though, has been under attack recently, and so we do support Tor connections, but they have been pretty unstable of late because there's an ongoing cyber attack against the Tor network. I don't know who it is, but I wish they would stop. But they are working on sort of a proof of work based system, I believe, for trying to work around this, or trying to get around this problem, in much the same way that Bitcoin gives you this immutable global ledger through proof of work. They're hoping that doing something similar with the Tor network will make it so that these attacks are either stopped or they're extremely expensive for someone to mount.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Sounds like, once again, there's so much flexibility and options with Passport and the Envoy app, which is critical. Just an easy app to use, and I use it myself, the Envoy app. I know there's some listeners here, they're probably a little confused with different use of terms, and there's no one better to ask than you. Okay, hot wallet, hardware wallet, cold storage. Just tell us all the differences, please.
Sure. Yeah. So the hot wallet is similar to like the wallet you carry in your pocket or purse. It's for smaller amounts of money. Hot wallet means that it's online. Mm-hmm. What does it mean that it's online? It means that the private key is on a device that's connected to the internet. So the downside with that is that it's potentially open to hacking or to malicious third party. Let's say there's a wallet that you're using, Super Bitcoin wallet, and that guy, he's all these millions of people have their hot wallet set up with him. He can put some code into the app that sends all of the seeds back to his server, and then he can drain the accounts if he wants to. So even using a software wallet, you have to be careful to know who's in charge of that wallet and know what code is in there. So with Envoy, the code's all open source. So there is still some trust involved today, where with Passport, we can actually tell, or a user can actually tell what code is running in here, because we provide a reproducible build with a build hash where you can say, oh, this source code resulted in this firmware file. And that's something that can be proven by somebody, like a software engineer can build it again and show, yep, that code resulted in this binary and this firmware. And so what that means is you can trust that there's nothing nasty in our code, because the code's right there for everybody to see. With software wallets, unfortunately, neither Apple nor Google provide an ability for you to do that kind of traceability from software to binary. And so, one of the things we want to do, I mentioned we'd love to do a phone. We're not at that point yet, but if we did, we would make it such that the source code is traceable, and you can say, okay, this source code resulted in the binary that you're running on your phone now. What that would do is make it so that you can trust your hot wallet completely again. Right now, we're a US company, we're accountable under the law, and we would get in a lot of trouble and go to jail if we were to do anything like that. So you can see our source code, but you still sort of have to trust that the code you're running on your phone is the same as what we say it is. And there's really not much way around that today with the way the Apple and Google platforms exist. but back to the hot cold wallet topic. The hot wallet is not as safe as a cold wallet. There are ways potentially for people to take the money out, which is why, just like your normal wallet, if you're a millionaire, you don't carry $1 million around in your wallet. You keep that in your bank. You carry a few $100 or whatever. If you're rich, maybe a couple of $1,000. I worked for a guy briefly when I was in Canada, and at lunch one day we were talking about how they were discontinuing the $1,000 bill, and he's like, "Oh, you mean these?" And he opens his wallet, and he's got like $10,000 bills in his wallet. I'm like, yeah, those, okay. So yeah, that's walking around money. The hot wallet is accessible and potentially able to be hacked, whereas the cold wallet or hardware wallet is more typically, a cold wallet is one that's offline. There's no wired or wireless connection that would allow you to access the seed words or sign a transaction onto the network. So hot and cold is essentially online and offline. And then hardware wallet, technically you can use it for either one. You could use a passport. That's not quite what I mean. You can use it for small amounts, or you can use it for big amounts. Is kind of what I mean. It's never an online wallet, but you could use it as a daily wallet if you chose to, which would help make it a safer. It's like a safer hot wallet almost, where you can still use it for smaller amounts if you choose to, but it's more likely that you're going to use it for your larger amounts of money. So the cold wallet is like your bank account. It's like your generational wealth that you don't want to lose. And so, you put it in a bank for more protection today. Previously banks would keep that money in a vault. Like, in order to get that cash, you had to physically access the bank. So it was sort of an offline storage. You couldn't, if your bank was in, California, you couldn't be in like Albuquerque, New Mexico and steal that cash because you don't have long arms. But and so cold storage is like that, where you need physical access to this device in order to be able to control that money. Without this device, without this signing device, without the key that's in here, there's nothing you can do, nothing anybody can do to take your money. And so cold and hot is, hot and cold is online and offline, but the wallet can control, it's an offline device, but it can control like any amount of money that you sort of choose.
Love that. We got the CTO explaining to us something that is so simple, but you know what? You simplify it so well. And the hot and cold, that's a great way to refer to these wallets, is one's online and one's offline. So thank you so much for explaining that. So any plans to have a wallet that is going to have more than just Bitcoin? Do you have any plans at Foundation Devices to explore other crypto, or are we just focused on Bitcoin and Satoshi?
Nothing at the moment. I don't know if that'll ever change, but we're focused on Bitcoin right now. We are going to be looking at bringing Lightning support most likely into Envoy, as well as some other features. We're looking at doing just on the short-term roadmap. I guess I can tell you, like on Envoy short-term roadmap, we're about to release version 1.2, which is mostly stability improvements and bug fixes, quality of life improvements. Then in version 1.3, we're doing full Taproot support for sending and receiving Taproot.
Oh, the Taproot.
And then
cool.
in 1. And then in 1.4, it's a pretty big one. We're introducing coin control and coin tagging and custom fees. So that's going to be a really, really big update, and it's a pretty highly requested feature in the coin control. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I can maybe give a little bit of a description
Please,
of what that is. But
tell us about that. You're really on the forefront of technology in the future. So please share with us these important things.
Sure. Yeah, so coin control is this idea that Just as when you pull out your wallet, your store, right? You decide. Let's say you've got a couple of $1 bills, a $5 bill, a 20, and a 100. And your purchase comes to $37. What are you going to pay with? Are you going to pay with two 20s, or are you going to pay with the 100, or what is the mix of bills that you're going to pull out to pay for this thing? Your Bitcoin is really similar in a lot of ways to bills in a wallet, except that the bills can have any denomination. So you could sort of have like a $17.37 bill in your wallet. And so we call those things UTXOs in Bitcoin, or unspent transaction outputs. And they're really kind of like that. Like it's a bill in that it's not it's irreducible. Like you have a $20 bill, you can't go split it in half and give $10 to someone and $10 to someone else. Like it doesn't work that way. You have to give them the whole bill, and they have to give you some other bills back. And so the UTXO model of Bitcoin is exactly like that, except instead of these really nice divisions of 1, 5, 10, 20, you can sort of have any amount you want on that bill. And so what coin control is the ability for you to choose which of those bills you're going to spend with. Okay, well, why would you care? Why would you want to do that? Well, there's this idea of provenance, like where did this money come from? Who knows about these transactions? So, we talked about KYC earlier. So let's say you have some money that came from an exchange, some Bitcoin that came from an exchange. Many people want to treat those coins differently than coins they got, say, from mining or from buying from someone off Bisq or something, where they didn't have to provide any personal information. So we'll give you the ability to tag transactions and UTXOs and say, oh, this one is KYC, or it came from Binance. Oh, these ones, I mined these ones, and so you can tag those ones. And we can allow you to, with the coin control feature, we're going to let you pick a tag and or an individual bill, individual UTXO that's tagged inside one of those groups. And so the idea there is you can, depending on who you're sending to, you might want the KYC stuff might be only used for certain transactions where you don't care if some chain analysis firm traced that back to you. Maybe you don't care, but then the mining stuff, you want to keep it sort of pure. And so we let you, but like you can choose to tag things for whatever reasons you might want. I'm sure people will have other use cases for them as well. But the idea is like you can then go into these tags and choose the bills that you want to pay for something with.
Very cool. Now I saw on your website, can you change the setting from Satoshis to Bitcoin? And is it interchangeable in how the denomination is?
Yeah, you can change it. We have some improvements in the pipeline to make it even better. And also to support testnet. So right now it's like Sats versus BTC, but in testnet there's T-Sats and T-BTC. So we have a couple of improvements where in testnet it'll put the T in front of it, and we're also in some places we're putting the Bitcoin logo for Bitcoin, and there's like a little icon for Sats as well now that we're gonna integrate there as well. So if you prefer to denominate in Sats, which is probably what will happen for most of us in the future as Bitcoin grows, nobody's going to be sending whole Bitcoins if Bitcoin is worth millions of dollars. They're going to be denominating things in Sats. So we do support that, and we have a few improvements coming to make that even nicer. We had one customer complain that the text was too big in one spot for the Bitcoin they were sending, because they were sending like a large amount of Bitcoin. We're like, so we actually have a bug in our bug tracker called millionaire mode, where if you happen to be sending like millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, then it sizes the font properly so that it's still visible. So
Wow, you guys have everything covered. I love it. It's exciting. You're on the forefront of this technology and foundation devices. Awesome. We need to explain these terms, free and open source. And I know that is what you use at Foundation Devices. So please tell us about those terms and what they mean.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this has been like critically important to us right from the beginning. Everything we do is open source, and we believe that a hardware wallet isn't really trustable unless it's open source. So certain companies like Ledger believe the opposite. They think that if the source code is, hidden, that makes it more secure because it's harder to discover vulnerabilities in it. That's called security through obscurity, where the fact that you just don't know how a system works is thought to make it secure. But history is rife with hackers discovering vulnerabilities in these systems and then taking advantage of them because nobody knew about them. So the alternative is to be open and transparent. So a system that is completely open and transparent is subject to observation by experts and review by experts, and those people have the skills and are able to evaluate is this thing secure. So this whole security through obscurity thing has been pretty roundly rejected by the security community, not just for Bitcoin but for any kind of security at all. And in our opinion, like your hardware is protecting the private key for like your life savings. So relying on security through obscurity doesn't seem like the best idea to us. So we decided right from the beginning, the source code's all open for Envoy and Passport. In fact, the hardware design is also open. So you can go onto our website and see exactly what processor we're using, what secure element we're using, how are they connected together, what does the power circuit look like? Is there any chance for a side channel attack in there? And so it's all up there and open for review. And we actually did a full security review of Passport, which we published on our website, which was really interesting because the group that we worked with, the wallet.fail team, they weren't expecting us to publish it because no one who had done a security review with them in the past had published it because there were these findings and they didn't want to have those findings made public. So we had the opposite thought, like we wanted to publish this. We wanted this to be something that people could look at and say, hey, these guys reviewed it. Here's a couple of minor things they found. Here's how they've been fixed. Now this wallet is in a better condition than it was prior to this security audit. And so without open source, like that would have been useless. Like there would have been no point for us to put up a security audit with no proof. It's you've got proof of work with Bitcoin. Well, prove to me that your wallet is secure. If you can't prove to me it's secure, why should I believe you? I don't believe the exchanges when they say they're going to keep my money safe. Why would I trust that you're going to keep my money safe when you keep everything secret as well? So, we, like I mentioned, we also also open source Envoy, and so that source code is all up there as well. So you can trust that, trust the Passport source code, and we also, just as far as open source goes, we've open sourced a lot of our libraries that we're using as well. We contribute back to libraries that we use ourselves. Let's see what else. I mentioned security through obscurity a few minutes ago, and that certain aspects of a system, remain unknown to an attacker. The alternative, like we have, is totally open. So if an attacker knows everything about the system, except, for example, like a secret PIN or your seed, we think that's just a much better position to be in because, like, imagine a bank with a transparent vault door. The entire mechanism and how it functions is sort of known to the attacker, but the vault code is still a secret. That vault is still secure. Imagine you didn't know what was inside there, and it turned out that someone figured out, like, oh, if you like wiggle the dial when it's on the number nine, then you can just pull the handle and you'll be able to get in.
Mhm.
Like, somebody can discover those things, through experimentation. Whereas if it's transparent, it's more likely to be discovered earlier in the process, because there's going to be more eyes on it, more people trying to break it, and then once that thing is fixed, you have proof that it's fixed. Versus like a closed system, Ledger these Ledger Recover system, people are like, oh, how long has it had the ability to send my private key up to the cloud? And they gave an answer about when it was introduced, but like, you have no proof of that. It could have been there since day one, for all you know. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe, probably they're telling the truth, but you don't know. But if you'd be able to look into it and see the history of their source code, they could just say, oh, look, here's the pull request on GitHub where we introduced this ability, and then we released this on March 25th, 2022 or something. There's traceability and accountability that comes with having things be open and transparent like this.
Well, I think accountability and traceability is key and absolutely necessary. Being a serial entrepreneur myself, I want to know about problems possibly occurring early, and that way you feel secure. I mean, it's if you go in the closed circuit and you don't know until, like you said, at some point it could, some issues could arise, and it's better to know earlier. I just love how transparent you are. And Foundation Devices is a different kind of hardware company. You have this emphasis on this open source, which is so important. To me, I mean, I'm a novice in the Bitcoin world, and I'm just blown away how I just think it's the most important thing. As I learn more, I think it's key. I think we're conditioned to accept things the way they are, and being closed, as humans, everything, the banks everything's done behind closed doors, and we don't know anything that goes on over there. And so in the government, I think that people need to understand the importance of this open source. And I love that you have that transparency, and that's key. Now,
so yeah.
Your website is awesome. I tell everyone, you guys should all check out Foundation Devices, because it's not just about the hardware and then the mobile app, but you talk about, and I'm gonna have to bring this up, Asimov Foundation Trilogy. And did you read that trilogy? Are you one of those bookworms that read that?
I did not, actually, but our CEO Zach is a huge fan, and he's read them. I know some of the story, and I watched the series last year on Apple TV.
Yes.
Which I've been told is quite different than the novels in many ways, but I do know some of the story, and I think the idea that humanity's going through this very difficult, dark time. I think that could be happening with us too. There's this idea that money is, what money is actually changing. And the fact that governments may no longer to be able to control it soon, has them scared. Imagine like income taxes. Like, how are they going to collect income taxes if like everybody pays everybody in Bitcoin and uses like CoinJoin and other anonymizing technologies so that you don't know where payments came from or who they went to? It's going to be impossible to collect taxes. Like, they're going to need to find new ways of paying for things like public infrastructure, roads, parks, social programs, welfare, all those types of things. Police departments. How are you going to pay for a police department if nobody's paying you income taxes? There will be ways. I mean, there are places where there's no personal income tax collected. So there will be ways for doing this, but I think the government is going to fight this fairly hard, because right now this is like their big lever, that's money printer go burr. They just sort of money print their way out of problems and tell you there's not going to be any inflation. I don't know, Rosanna, how about you? Have things you've been buying been going up in price over the last year?
I love talking economics. That is one of my favorite topics. But I have to say, fiat debasement is real, and it seems inevitable that they will have to print money again. The government's spending like crazy. There's mass debt, and we're probably most likely going to go into a difficult time period in the next few years. This will take time. There was a mass stimulus that occurred, and now the money supply is contracting at the fastest rate since the 1930s. And it seems that recession is in the future. Of course, I can't predict the future, but there's so many possible scenarios. Inflation seems embedded at the core level. It's very sticky. Ever since we went off the gold standard 1971, and now governments can just print, and that just devalues our currency. And that is the beauty of Bitcoin. We have an elastic supply, 21 million. And, it's interesting concept that if someone loses their keys and some Bitcoins are taken with the person to their grave, it actually increases the value of Bitcoin. It's like, it's the greatest thing you can do, right? It's like a self-sacrifice. You take it and you improve it. It's a beautiful thing. On your website, you talk about 3 major societal shifts. And I love that you bring up those points. It's truth, freedom. And you talk about how the global economy abandoned the gold standard. And then the Great Reset is going on. And, geopolitically, we are geoeconomic competitors with China. And there's a lot of multi-players in the world. We're all interconnected, transnational borders, which leads us to the third part, which is this information society we're in, this information entropy or overload of information. And, we have to master sorting because there's just too much information. We have bandwidth constraint. And at the same time, it's easy to censor people. And that is such a key concept. And I talked about it earlier. And it really opened my mind when I spoke with Michael Saylor about that, it's so easy to censor people, and how Bitcoin provides that authenticity. And it's just beautiful, that open source, transparency, and freedom, and the security. So tell us what that all means to you, with this whole, let's just wrap up with just this freedom, Bitcoin, truth, money, and foundation devices, and what it means to you and what you're seeing for the future of foundation devices, not just as short term that we discussed, but in the next few years, 5-10 years.
Wow, so deep. I guess on the freedom side, I did already sort of mention this, but we're all about giving you tools to survive this. If we go back to this Asimov concept here, and there's going to be this upheaval, what we want to do is give you the tools to survive that, to have, and who knows if this is a single generation shift. This could be, something that our kids are still going through, and then maybe their kids, who knows? But if we give you the tools now to get set up in a position, just like in the foundation series, they have to set up this this foundation, this library type of thing to store information, and sort of have humanity be able to recover out the other side. We want to give you the tools to be able to survive and come out the other side of, what does money look like in the end. So sovereignty is freedom. We're building, freedom technology, basically. And so the first expression of that is the Passport wallet. Envoy is the second expression of that. And then we have plans in the future for other products, which unfortunately I can't say too much about now, but they are not all hardware wallets. That's all I can say.
We got our hint.
We think that, I already told you about, we wanted to do a phone, but there is other stuff as well. I think we've also talked publicly at one point or another about doing like a node. That's not really in the short term at the moment, but we think that being self-sovereign at some point in the future, you know, there's already existing nodes out there. Some of them are not very good, but we think that there's an opportunity there at some point. It might be a bit too early for that to be a major product for us. But back to your topic, like we want to build products that enable you to be freer and more self-sovereign. You know, the economic reset, you know, I don't know a lot about the plan that they have in mind. Mostly I don't listen to them because I think most of what they say is just bullshit aimed at keeping down the population, keeping people from realizing what they're actually doing. So I don't put much stock in any plans that they put forth. I think it's up to us in the Bitcoin space to decide what the future looks like. I think building on Bitcoin, building a whole new ecosystem and infrastructure on top of Bitcoin is what we need to do. And there's companies doing that right now. Long term, you know, you asked, are we going to support any other coins or any other crypto? It's not something that's in our ethos to do. We think that Bitcoin is the key to all of this. I don't know whether one thing we had potentially talked about is like whether there's an opportunity, like especially if we did like a node, for example, that could be a platform for third-party development. You know, we are open and transparent. So if we made a node and we made an SDK for it, we're not going to stop you if you want to build a Monero node on top of it, or a Monero wallet, or whatever. We would welcome people doing that, but that's not where we're going to focus our energy. We think that our energy is best spent on providing these tools for people to help bring them into the future, into a Bitcoin future. And if some other coins happen to tag along for the ride, you know, I assume that's because they had some value that people saw, and maybe we missed out on that. But you know, our key premise is that Bitcoin and things around Bitcoin, like Lightning, are going to be the most important things in the future.
Beautiful. A company with the real purpose and mission. I love that. Socially responsible, and at the core, all about freedom and empowering people to have self-sovereignty and have control. And that's a key word through our discussion today: control over their destinies. And, you know, it's, you know, economic slavery is real. And a lot of people have said that we're on a road to serfdom. And, you know, with our currency being devalued, and it's scary for our children and the future. So Bitcoin presents an opportunity for us. And I love your foundation devices, which go hand in hand, free and open source. I love that transparency. Ken, please tell everyone how they can stay in touch with you, find out more about Foundation Devices and you.
Yeah. So we have a Telegram channel for Foundation Devices. We also have Twitter. We have a blog on foundationdevices.com. You know, there's a mailing list that you can sign up for on our website. I'm Ken at foundationdevices.com for my email address if anyone has technical stuff they'd like to talk about. You know, the best place, we also have a hello at Foundation Devices, which is our inbox for customer support and any kind of reach out for potential customers. You know, for people who are really new to Bitcoin and who are uncomfortable, you know, even with the automated walkthrough that Envoy provides, we also provide a concierge onboarding service. One of our employees is Bitcoin Q&A, and he's a team member who came to us after having written a really amazing Bitcoiner guide, which helped, you know, with videos and tutorials on how to onboard to Bitcoin, how to use various wallets, and he's been, you know, putting together some amazing content for people since joining our team. You know, and you can get a concierge onboarding session with him as part of your checkout flow when you purchase a passport. So I'd really encourage anyone who's really uncomfortable. You can try it first if you want without that. But if you'd love someone to hold your hand through it, he goes above and beyond in explaining concepts in ways that people can understand, and getting people set up and feeling comfortable and confident that their money is safe.
That's awesome that you provide that for people, because sometimes you just need a little guidance when you get started on that path. But thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing. Love speaking with you, Ken Carpenter. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rosanna. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to talking again sometime.
Absolutely. I look forward to it as well. And thank you to all the listeners. Thank you for listening to the Rose Show podcast. Please visit rosannaprestia.com for more episodes. See you soon. All investment, real estate, financial, legal, and tax opinions expressed by Rosanna Prestia or on The Rose Show should not be relied upon as professional advice and are intended to be used for informational purposes only.